Hello, homebrewed Christianity people. This is Tripp, and I'm here with Christian.
Hey.
This is like a election hangover edition of homebrewed Christianity and the Culture Cast.
Yeah.
I guess we should just say up front, this is not going to be anything like normal episodes. Also should stay up front. We are two progressive Christian white men who are straight, married to wives, and have kids, including daughters. So that's what we're going to be trying to talk about.
Yep.
Our experience of this as citizens, as a dad, as a husband, and as Christians. And if you are looking for something to get upset about, or us getting really angry or something, or you feel free just to skip this. Like, you're just going to hear raw emotions and responses to the election. And I promise I probably will feel completely different when we're done than whatever I say now and later. But I think it's important for especially people that listen to both of our podcasts and a lot of progressive Christian podcasts not to feel like completely alone and strung out if you're in places where your friends are celebrating and you're like, I can't. So I got at least 10 messages last night during the results and have all morning like, y'all need to do something.
Yep.
Christian for getting on. And you have any preface statements or something?
No, I've had the same thing. There are people who are enraged, who are shocked, who are grieving, and who are looking for signs of hope. And I'm dealing with a mix of those things. I woke up with my gastrointestinal system in knots last night a few times. My wife, was a mess last night. This morning, my kids were. We'll get there, but I think that what we can do best. You don't need our help to be enraged and to grieve. What I think we need to do is to process together and to look for a path, forward from here, because things continue to move forward in spite of themselves sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. The idea we had was just to kind of organize it in three parts. First, talking as citizens, and then talking as members of families, as dads and husbands, and then talking as Christians, religiously, not Christian's name being Christian.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's what we're going to do. The one thing that hit my mind right as I was walking back here with a cup of coffee to do this is I didn't realize this, but when you're out here in California for Theology Beer Camp, it's like the last days of Obama's presidency.
Yeah.
And the inauguration's the Monday after beer camp.
Oh, man.
And so
I hadn't thought of it that way.
No, I didn't either. I was like, oh my, this is going to be like the biggest Debbie Downer of experience. Luckily, there'll be beer there.
Yeah. And, we're better to process this kind of stuff than together.
Yeah.
And to gird ourselves for what we're called to do and to be as citizens, moving forward from there. And that how we put that what we believe into action and not just sit around and complain about it for the next 4 years. I'm sick of complaining,
And I think this is the other thing to let people know that that event's the 19th to the 21st here in LA. But on the 18th, there's a pre-event that the Hatchery, the school I work at, is putting on that is called Third Rail Theology, Race, Class, and White Privilege in the Church.
Ooh.
I thought it was an important issue before this happened.
Wow, now?
But I think that right now, so, if you're coming, you should just come early enough to go to that. If you're in the LA area, you should just come to that, even if you aren't coming the whole event. But yeah, and I think as citizens, like if we're beginning and talking as citizens, then that like recognizing just how divided the country is, and it is something. I don't know. What do you think? Like, what does that even mean to you? Because personally, like short of Facebook, and I even went on Facebook to find out. Like, I mean, there's like, I don't know, 6,000 people or something that like homebrewed Christianity. 23 of them like Donald Trump. Like,
Right.
and then I go look at them, and I know half of them only click like just to follow his junk and then to mock it.
Right.
So, like, and I know, like at my church, it is a very multiracial congregation. We have a gay minister, but it's kind of like a progressive evangelical, multiracial, very small UCC church, and I couldn't imagine. I don't know anyone in my congregation, at work, or places that thought about voting for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And so, in now LA County, like Hillary won by like 1 million votes or something like that. It was
Right.
really crazy. Like she won by more votes here than multiple states have in them
Combined. Yeah. Right.
And I think, and she's actually won the popular vote, right? Like, so it looks like she's going to win the popular vote by 2%. So as a citizen, like knowing how like closed in a sense the world I live in is, a city in a more progressive context, like what do you do with the immediate repulsion you have as a citizen to think, how in the world does a bully, and insert every other thing we can think about Donald Trump, like even have people show up?
Right. Well, first of all, I do think it's worth noting the irony of what you just mentioned with the popular vote versus the result of the election. And this is not the first time that something like this has happened. Bush and Gore, same thing happened. My understanding of the primary reason that the Electoral College was created in the first place was to protect a populace from itself. And yet now, when the popular vote stands in favor of Hillary Clinton for president, we are electing this person that many of us see as dangerous. But the other reality is a lot of people on the other side. And the hard work of compassion is the toughest thing for me right now. And I'm not really there yet. The best I can do is I've been reciting the prayer of St. Francis, where there's hatred, let me so love, where there's injury, pardon, etc. Because I feel like at some point I'm going to learn to internalize that. Where I am right now, and the one silver lining that I see at the moment, is a lot of people getting together. I'm seeing a lot of people say, hey, let's get together for dinner. Let's, cry, let's hug, let's talk about this, and then let's figure out what we do next. And not just to dismantle the Trump presidency, but what we do for the betterment of humanity and to live out what we believe as followers of the gospel.
Yeah, I think for me as a citizen thinking about this, and Hillary and Obama both talked about this today, is like there's the whole process of democracy and the nation state, and our whole form of government is premised on some kind of shared principles where you have a public square, you have fights and your parties, and then you support that person, you have fights at the national level, and then you try to govern and work together. And they both took this tone of, this is what we have to do, this is what it means to be an American, and all that kind of stuff. And that would actually, I completely get that. It's just I'm sitting there also thinking like, yeah, but they've already quit being part of a democracy a long time ago. We have an opening in the Supreme Court, and the quote constitutionalist party that really care about the Constitution made up new rules just not even to like vote on it.
Right.
And and then they'll point to the time the Democrats did the same thing to them at some point, and it goes back and forth.
Right.
And so the difficult thing for me as a citizen is to go like, is this a time you're going to look? This is the time, like, we're supposed to like person up to the table and be like supportive and jovial and all this kind of thing. When you're like, we won the popular vote. Y'all haven't let the guy actually serve as president this whole time because you've been working against him. You elected a birther. who is a misogynist,
Who's under investigation for tax fraud.
yes, and other things with children that are under, like um, the if it was any of the other Republican candidates, then I could imagine feeling so different. And the fact that, like, and I'm like a huge democracy fan. Like, I actually like America. I'm not like so progressive I wish we were something different. I think progressives through this whole election have demonstrated how like irrational they are. They don't understand most of the country, and they think that somehow like justice isn't being done when a socialist who isn't even part of the Democratic Party, which is a private organization, actually works to have its own representative represent them in the national election, and they just like go nuts. Like so I think like the Trump stuff has a correlate on the left of people that don't recognize that democracy actually has rules, this patterns and an integrity to it that requires us to actually engage each other and work together. And we're having more and more generations where we have more and more voters who don't have an experience where there was a functioning democracy in the White House. Right. And that's the thing. That's the thing that scares me the most. Not like honestly, I don't think Donald Trump believes half of what he said.
He said he doesn't.
But that's kind of beside the point for me.
Right.
Like, I want to know as a citizen, what does it look like for us to try to make the United States function better than it has?
Right. And somebody on my Facebook feed said, who's going to hold him accountable at this point? Because now we have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, a Republican in name at least president, and most likely a Republican majority Supreme Court. So where are the checks and balances? And what I said was there's going to be an onus on us as citizens to hold them accountable. And it's really hard to believe in that right now, today, when I see what happened, especially when once again the Electoral College has gone a different way than the popular vote. But to back up first, to me, all of this has to stem from a place of deep listening and compassion. As much as I don't want to listen to the quote other side, but the reality is that other side is my mom and her husband and people who I have been in close relationship with for a lot of my life, as friends, as family members, etc. So I have a responsibility to try to understand where this fear, where this anger is coming from. And yes, some of it is fear of the loss of perceived entitlement and privilege that people feel like it was due to them and now is being taken. I think one of the things that Van Jones on CNN last night said is very apt. He said, "This is white lash against a changing nation."
Yeah, and I think that's important. It's not a class revolt. Right. Donald Trump won with rich Republicans. Like, the average money income for Donald Trump Republicans is higher than the Republican Party average.
And women, he pulled a lot of women in.
And and it's not a class thing, because if you had to vote, I mean, obviously Hillary won the popular vote anyway, but right. if you voted, like, every group other than white people, regardless of their income, regardless of what part of the country they live in, it was a very, very clear statement. Right. And the craziest part, and people, the other part is, like, we just need, like, until people are okay recognizing that race played a very important role in the sabotage of Obama's presidency and in the election of Donald Trump, who became popular by saying he was a fraud. Like, it drives me up a wall that the KKK can endorse a dude. You can like fiddle with the alt-right. You can say the black president is a Muslim and wasn't born in the country. And then we are being crazy leftists when we're like, yeah, I'm going to guess that race played a big role in this. And you might be racist if you don't, like, if you, and not knowing it doesn't, not, you can be unconsciously racist. It is a very, very, it is a reality. And so
that's go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just like, so like to me, like, I'm from North Carolina. So if I put my Facebook feed on my North Carolina friends, all my family, this does not include you. Like my family have been Democrats and are sick and stuff. But I have lots of friends that like would never say they're racist. And then they share and post all sorts of racist things. And I don't know how to begin that conversation with them. I just know that in my head, I go, I would feel horrible if I said that. Like, you can't say that in front of my kids, and I don't know what to do with this. And so that cultivating the compassion thing is so hard. And I think it is a task, but I mean, as a citizen, for me to, like, I want the country to run well and for us to work together and all that kind of stuff. But it's really hard to cultivate compassion, not for someone believing different ideas about the economy or something like that, but for just straight race baiting. And I have so many friends here in the West Coast who did not understand with the whole time when I'm like, he is racist. He's baiting racist. That's what he's doing. I know I have a lot of racist friends. And they don't think they're racist, but they just really like all the race baiting.
Well, how many people have you ever heard say, oh, yeah, I'm admittedly a racist?
Sadly, more than you.
Okay, wow. And I'm from Texas.
I know. But anyway, we don't have to go about Texas.
No.
Texas was a lot closer than expected.
It was. Well, yeah, and a lot
I want one of those Castro brothers to run next time against Trump, because they are smart, good looking. They both have done a really good job, and they're like just slight of left of center Democrats, and oh man, I wish one of the Castro brothers or Biden had ran this time. Then
yeah, Biden just wasn't in a place to, and the reality is that in a different time. In a Goldwater era or something like that, Hillary Clinton would have been a Republican. She's center. And you know, in fact, and it sounds a bit like I'm trying to pull you along to the center here, but which is ironic because I'm so far left, it's ridiculous. But I do think that where this comes from to start is from table and story. And I know that sounds all feel good and tra-la and kumbaya and all that shit. That's fine. But, you know, I heard a story from a veteran who talked about all that he had lost, regardless of how you feel about military aggression, war, and I'm putting
my family's packed full of military, so I like
right,
and I'm not a pacifist,
right, and I am.
I'm a hopeful. I probably like Niebuhr more than you're allowed to as a progressive Christian.
Yeah.
I
still like you.
I know, but I'm just saying, like the weird part about this, right? Like, when you hear stories, when you engage at table, all sorts of different things are possible. But as citizens, I think we've lost the trust in letting the people we elect actually do the same. Like, right. We don't Barack Obama just invited Trump over to the White House tomorrow. And that is a classier move than I would muster, unless he gets there and sucker punches him in the nuts.
I don't think that's a peaceful transfer of power.
Well, it's not transfer of power time yet. He's still POTUS for a bit. But I mean, like, literally, he ran a campaign attacking you on your race.
Yeah.
And made like lots of people who are in closed ideological bubbles really think the fact your middle name is Hussein means you're like a Kenyan secret Muslim. Like,
but you punch him in the nuts, and then
I'm just saying,
become the thing you hate. So
I don't think so. Like, I just mean, you know, like, I'm just saying, like, that level of class, like Obama's doing, in inviting him over. Like, I feel like one of the problems is it's real hard for us as citizens to give our leaders permission to sit down and work stuff out and compromise and go together. I want to get to that place, and I could totally get there with all but two of the Republican nominees. How crazy is it? I'm sitting here going, don't you remember when George W. Bush was president?
Oh, the good old days, right?
Yeah, or Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, Mitt Romney. The Mormons got to look at the evangelicals and see, we were true believers. Y'all are nuts.
Yeah, you guys are cray.
It's their new door to door. When they go to the door, if they are like, well, so you're not even Christian. Well, we're the people that follow Jesus that didn't think voting for Trump was a good idea. That should be their new first.
Yeah, although Utah went crazy strong for Trump. Well, let's just put that out there. Although the independent also was very solid. But to go back to the veteran thing for just a second, I'm not going to beat this to death. But what he said, I think, exemplified some things that we have to heed as progressive Christians, which was that he gave everything he had. Right? He is now physically disabled and traumatized for the rest of his life. He is actually living in poverty and just subsistence living at this point, and has felt completely abandoned by the citizenry that vowed to support and honor him and his service. And so there is that feeling that anything that represents the status quo is the enemy. And I think that combined with this, and that is an example of the tone deafness, one of many in this election, where, you know, we kept talking about that this was the end of the Republican Party. Give me a break, dude. The Democrats were the most tone deaf party in this entire election. And they have not recognized, especially in the Rust Belt, that there are two substrate issues here that they're just not addressing, which is anger and fear. Whether it's fear of brown people, whether it's fear of gay people, whether it's just fear of change or loss of jobs or whatever it is, there's fear and anger. And if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of need, those are going to drive everything else. If you're driven by anger and fear, you will justify and intellectualize anything else you have to get anger and fear alleviated first.
And Trump knows that. That's why he ran the campaign he did. He's a salesman, and
he's not an idiot.
No, I mean,
he may be a sociopath, but he's not an idiot.
Yeah. And I don't even mean that in like a negative way. I mean, like, he knew what he was actually running a campaign.
That's right. And
then Hillary's response was basically, well, yeah, you may be fearful and scared, but it would be even worse if he's president. Don't you think? So anyway, I would have done a lot of things differently if I was in charge of a campaign, which I don't think anyone should ever put me in charge of a campaign, because my campaign would have been like, would you like humans to breathe in 300 years? You're going to have someone that's not going to cancel all of our progress on environmental issues, and probably someone that listens to scientists. Next. Yeah. Like in my head, I'm thinking this whole conversation, you're having like lots of fights, and the fear and all the worry and stuff comes from people whose losing identity is really connected to globalization of our economy and the changing of technology. Like, and we aren't going to change that. Trump can't change that. And he knows that, and that he didn't care. Like, he was just going to say the right things to deal with the emotions. And then, like, Hillary and company just was not thinking.
Like, this is, we should point out, this is a populist movement. This is not per se a Tea Party or a conservative movement, because the neocons championed and welcomed globalization in a different way than the Clintons did. Yeah. The Clintons welcomed economic globalization. The neocons welcomed military globalization. And now the populists are saying, screw that and screw you. Take care of us right here at home right now. And we need to hear that if we're going to make any progress as a unified country at all.
And I think a lot of it is connected to the way demographics are shifting in the United States, and in like this even shows up in the way between social media and the way our jobs and careers and all that kind of stuff deal with us, you get moved around basically if you're going to be a professional as you move to graduate schools. So you disengage from your community of origin. Mine, North Carolina, yours is in Texas, right? You go to grad school, you move around, and you're with people who all think that like the economic sacrifice and leaving the people you grew up with is worth this progress towards whatever your vocation or career is. And then you end up at a place in a society next to other people who have made similar sacrifices to financial and moving and all that kind of stuff. And they are the ones that where you are in more diverse environments and all that kind of thing. So it shapes you. But in the same way, when we leave places that then get more where sameness grows, because like rural areas and the communities that turned out most for Trump are like ones where sameness is normative and sameness is a sign of safety.
Right.
And I would guess that most people listen to either one of our podcasts, and any progressive Christian, like the things about your life that make you most uncomfortable are just how monolithic your congregation is on Sunday. Mm-hmm. And that's a real issue for you, and you worry about it. Mm-hmm. Like, and you worry if your kid goes to a school where everyone actually is the same religion or the same race or the same class. Like we have a natural value for as more progressive people valuing diversity.
Yeah.
And right. And I don't think it's hard for us to imagine people that see the things that we're grateful for, right? Mm-hmm. Like that my kid has a birthday party where there are more people of color there than were in my elementary school total. Right. And I'm like, hell yeah, Elgin. Mm-hmm. That's right. But see, like I feel like that's part of the gap. It really is. Like if you made a list of the 20 people you care for, and if you're not so progressive that you stopped praying, like the ones I pray for every week are not all white people. They aren't all people that agree with me. But the diversity of people whose you value is high, and the diversity is a value in and of itself. Mm-hmm. That is a fear-causing reality to people that that is hard, I think, for LA and Portland to get. And I try explaining it to people, that ask about how Southerners deal with this. And I mean, you mean Southern white people, because that's what goes. And when we say evangelicals, it tends to mean white evangelicals. We just say evangelicals. But what do you think? Like, to me, I in trying to think of what we do as citizens and stuff, part of it I think has to be celebrating the types of community and spaces and trying to cultivate them for others where this value shift happens. Because until sameness isn't a safety blanket for too many people of the country, nothing is going to really change, because we know the demographic shift is happening. Right? Like, we can see that.
Well, and we reinforce that sort of echo chamber effect, where we reinforce. I say it's like opinion feedback, a feedback loop where we get reinforced, and someone gets ugly on your Facebook page, your Twitter page, so you block them, you mute them. And I've done this. Somebody gets incredibly ugly or hostile, I just cut them off. And then what I realize is, oh damn, everybody who's on my page now, thinks and talks a lot more like me. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't conservatives and things like that on my page, but anyway, it takes intention. Some of it is inevitable in the progress of a pluralistic society, which our nation was set up on the principles of to begin with. Now, it may be the different kind of pluralism than people are used to, but they had a hard time with Italians and Irish mixing. This was the other issue back in the day, and this is something that takes intention, and it takes again, I'm going back to this drumbeat. It takes a compassionate heart to address, because this is even an issue in our downtown Portland progressive church, where we are integrating a lot of other people from who live on the streets, LGBTQ people, as we've become open and affirming, and another congregation that is nesting with us and is integrating more and more with us. And we see that resistance. So the reality is that being conservative isn't just the harbinger of the fear of difference. It is a human inclination. And so we have to be mindful of that. One of the things, I'll stop at this, Eric Elnes said, when you challenge these normative values, these cultural norms and standards that have stood the historical test of time, relatively speaking, you are asking people to witness a death. And I thought that was really important.
Mm-hmm.
When we say, get over it, this is a pluralistic global society, get over it. This is the end of evangelical Christianity as you know it, get over it. This is the end of white privilege as you know it, get over it. What he's saying is, even though those seem clear and obvious and welcome to a lot of us, it also feels like a death for a lot of people. And we need to learn how to respect how hard and how painful that is for some people, while also never shying away from the mandate that we have to advocate for and to fight for that inevitable, necessary change that I think the gospel calls us to.
I think that's really important. And the difficulty, I think, is especially in a situation like this election, is to have enough compassion on the people you're trying to give the space to realize that this really is a death, that this is an end to an important part of the way they saw themselves, the country, their identity. It's really hard to give the dignity to them to let that die.
That's right.
And the throes of power and violence that are coming out of that fear kills black people in the streets.
That's right.
Oppresses LGBTQ brothers and sisters. Puts on the way to school today, Elgin, he was very upset, and he starts to get out of the car and starts crying. Mm-hmm. And he says, I don't know what to do. And he lists off his friends. He said, what do I do with and he names his Muslim friend and his Hispanic friends and his black friends. And he's like, what do you say to him? What do you do? I can just be their friend. And he says, Dad, one of my friends, Dad, Trump said he wants to deport him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the golden rule.
Right.
Because no one, people voted knowing that he wants to deport my friend's dad and take his dad away.
Mm-hmm. And
so if you're a conservative and you hear we want to have compassion, all this kind of stuff, and the death thing, the other side of it is if you have close friends who, not white dudes, I doubt we're going to experience this as the world's worst thing, right? We need to recognize that on both sides, there are people who are scared because of this conclusion,
mm-hmm.
and are rightfully so. Because you have a law and order president who wants to build a law, talked about grounding people up, and can't figure out who David Duke is to deny his endorsement until he remembers that they were friends once, and then he didn't like him. You can't unhear and say all that stuff and not know the fear that is also instilled on the other side.
Right.
So that's why I think the church and Christians and just citizens really need to figure out how to cultivate compassion. And this is not a compassionate conservatism that we're experiencing right now.
No.
And I also think that there is a non-compassionate progressive element that insists on a level of enlightened liberal purity. I was using progressive scare quotes around all those words. And anyone that's not as progressive on every little identity politics issue, or they're not progressive enough on an economic issue, or doesn't want to do this or that around ecology or something, then we end up demonizing even people that could be allies. Right? we need to change the tone and energy in which we fight for what we believe. Not that we don't do it, but we need to preserve human dignity while we do it. But at the same time, recognize, like, we can't look at people of color and tell them that this is okay, right? Like that they are overacting. And we can't look at our conservative friends in flyover country or in the South or Texas or our family that this is a giant victory for finally going back to America or whatever, their roots, and making America great again. We can't look at them and be like, yeah, stop being ridiculous. You're just insert all the words I really want to say all the time about people like that. Like,
Right.
I realize as a citizen that cultivating compassion, and I feel like today feels like the day after 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, that's
I
what
was
it feels
wandering around just like that this morning. Yeah.
like. I'm sitting here going, WTF? Except now I don't know if I'm going to be called. Like then I was worried I was going to get called up into a war.
Me too.
And now I'm too old for it. But I think I am still worried about like what does this mean about my life? And so as citizens, I feel like we need to figure that out. I don't know what it is, but I've had enough conversations with people I know in different places today to know that I think people want something like that, and they don't know how to do it. And that's why I think the prayer of St. Francis that you mentioned, and things like that, or maybe just praying for your enemies. And even if that means Donald Trump or the head of Black Lives Matter or whoever you see as your enemy, like praying for them long enough to be able to engage without, I don't know. Honestly, like underneath this whole thing, I'm sitting here going, yeah, and we're going to pray and have compassion on people long enough that we're going to be past the turning point for dealing with the environmental crisis, and the human species is screwed.
No,
that's
you don't
exactly what's underneath my.
This is where Walter Wink really has something going on, because he says that nonviolent engagement, and I know you're not a pacifist, and nonviolent engagement isn't really pacifism.
Well, and nonviolent protesting, all that stuff, is a democratic act, regardless of how you feel about national defense.
That's right. That's right.
Like, I've been to protests. I've taken my kid or Elgin with me. Like, I didn't mean that, and I just meant in like, if I was president, I would not have a problem ending genocide in Syria by using a gun. And when Christians disengage from the politics of America over some like weird hippie reasons, then I'm just like, that's fine and dandy. It's just, to me, it doesn't make sense. But I understand doing it. But like when people are like, I can't see a difference between Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, and Hitler. I'm like, you can't.
Wow.
Well.
Maybe you need to pay a little closer attention. Well, what you're talking about there is what, it's the Bonhoeffer dilemma, when he was saying, do I address, I don't believe in violence, but I don't see another way to end this. So what he did was, in conceding to the sense that he was willing to use violence to stop Adolf Hitler, he was also asking for mercy for his own lack of divinely inspired vision for something greater. And I do think that that's something that we have to spend time really considering. And yeah, doing the marches, doing the lock-ins, or the stand-ins or sit-ins or whatever in the protests are fine. But I also think we can get to a point where that's like some sort of alleviation of white guilt. Hey, well, I got arrested last week. I did this protest, so I'm doing the right thing, and now I can wash my hands of it. But yeah, I can relate to what you said about the kids. I don't know if we're kind of transitioning or.
Yeah, let's switch. Let's talk about family, because as a citizen, I'm just still really pissed off.
I'm grossed out.
Yeah, and honestly, like, we can do better, and we should do better. And as a Democrat, I'm still pissed that Hillary Clinton was our nomination.
Yeah.
I did not vote for her, did not give her money until after she won. And then I was on board because I know how democracy works.
Right.
So I'd just like to make a side observation that for people whose their purity of enlightened progressive Christian action was so much that you sat around mocking Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump all the time until this election. I'm not. I am. I might be more frustrated with you because you know better than I am with any of my backwards conservative friends that did exactly what I thought they would do. And I'm not surprised that white people in the South turned out to vote really big numbers for a race baiting president.
Right.
That's their MO. And that's something we all need to deal with and not figure out compassionately. But the thing, like when you are a liberal or a progressive or a Democrat and you can't figure out like that we got to a situation where if I went through my progressive friends' comments and talked, they were as concerned about those stupid emails as they were about not getting his taxes, about every other stupid thing Donald Trump did. Like
Right.
the moral equivalency that progressives did and is just mind-numbing because in like an actual world with a democracy like the United States, these citizens don't get to just invent what happens and what we do. Like, and when you disengage, the moment exactly what you want doesn't happen, and then you pox on all those houses, then you end up with stupid people in charge.
Well,
That's like, and Democrats have been disengaging, and in the voter turnout, you can go ahead and look at all the people who didn't show up. And
that's right. And we failed to mobilize. And the Clinton campaign failed to mobilize in Wisconsin and Michigan. We failed to help mobilize the non-Anglo vote. Women obviously did not feel the same sense of outrage toward him as they felt about something greater, some greater substrate issue. But also, you've got to think that Donald Trump is sending James Comey a fruit basket today. Talk about creating problems where they didn't exist. And that was one of the greatest miscarriages of justice that I have seen in the democratic process, even surpassing Bush v. Gore, I think. But as
Bush v. Gore is annoying. It felt stolen, but the Supreme Court did its job.
That's right.
I mean, obviously, I wish it was a different way. And I think everyone in the Middle East, after our dumb response to 9/11, wishes it went a different way. And everyone looking at the carbon levels we deal with today would have wished it had been a different way.
Yeah.
But at least we followed the mess ups there are very different than abrogating the actual tradition and stated expectations. James Comey, but still, that should not have changed this election.
It shouldn't have.
She won the popular vote by 2%, probably, is what the estimates are. Mm-hmm. And it would have probably been 4 if he hadn't done this kind of stuff. And that's still too small when you're running against Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Biden would have kicked his butt. Like, you would have won. Christian, you would have won if you ran against him. And, I don't know. We need a different way to do these stupid debates. That's one thing we need a difference on. I didn't see 3 complete sentences out of either side that involved the actual content of what we're dealing with. We went through 3 debates, and only as asides does climate change come up because Hillary knows to mention it. But you can't even debate the dude because he's like, it's invented by communist Chinese to ruin the economy. And you're just like, come on. And I know Republicans that voted for him have to have some, the functioning brain to understand how climate stuff works. Not all of them are young earthers who think Satan invented dinosaur bones and that climate change
is. But,
yeah, I know some of them are. But I mean, a lot of people voted for the guy that whatever was motivating them was not the well-being of your grandchildren, and because they know what the consequences of us enacting. And if he follows through on leaving the Paris Accord and stuff like that, I mean, I don't think people understand that when we do that, what we're modeling as people with power, privilege, and the amount of output we have, who's going to
a precedent
by that? It's just straight up the 2/3 Yeah, the poor in other countries.
That's right.
And it's going to lead to famine, to desertification, to more immigration problems. Like, there's a reason that, like, the national security has put climate change as that and like straight up nuclear winter stuff are like the two biggest threats we have. And there's a reason, because like it actually puts people in a panic mode. When you mention hierarchy of needs, when you can't grow food and the European state next to you hasn't, and they're the ones who screw up the environment, you're going to have bigger immigration problems in Europe. And the same's going to happen in the United States, except we're going to have a stupid wall. This
No, we're not.
You know what I mean?
We're not going to.
This is our foreign policy.
Yeah.
Like, and the like Comey. This is why it just drives me up. I see. We're not even editing this. This is Tripp getting this pissed.
I thought we weren't going to get to outrage.
I know. All right, we're going to move and talk.
I'm behaving myself.
You are. I didn't promise I was going to behave. I said I was going to try.
Yeah.
And I haven't dropped any, I don't think, curse words.
I have.
Well,
I
yeah,
always do.
but I haven't said them because all of them would be applied to people. And sometimes doing the right thing is just not following through on your emotions and what you're thinking.
That's right.
But
you can preach that.
Because anyway, I just know that like the entire way this whole thing took place was like it was a reality show and not putting someone to lead a country that is competent and able.
Yeah.
And like I think that Paul Ryan's a wuss, and so they need to get rid of him. And I think we need in Kasich. I think Kasich, because he was the only one. It's like I'm not voting for him. Somebody, I think Hillary should send him a big bouquet because like how many Republicans had the character to do what they said what they actually thought? Very few of them.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so
no, I mean Paul Ryan flip-flopped more than a fish out of water on this because he always wanted to make sure he was playing his cards right and ended up on the right side of that. But yeah, all of that aside, I mean, we've kind of beaten the dead horse of politics here. But with my kids, so they fell asleep before we got.
People don't know how many kids you have, ages and stuff. Go ahead and.
Yeah, I got Zoe is my daughter. She's 7. She'll be 8 in January. And Matthias is 12. He'll be 13 in 10 days. So yesterday, Matthias got in trouble, got in a fight, actually, in an argument with some kids at school who were basically taunting him about supporting Hillary Clinton. And, of course, my son cannot not take the bait.
No.
Yeah,
he's a pistol.
He really is.
Yeah, when you think of Hyatt getting animated and verbose, it's like that, but like with a pot of coffee.
Yeah, and some uppers. So he's really something, and he doesn't know when to keep his mouth shut. And so I was really worried about him this morning. Which, rightly so. He completely melted down. He went through that. My wife went to school with him, talked to a teacher who actually was very condescending toward him. And we had a little come to Jesus talk. She had a little come to Jesus talk with the administration at the school about that. But all that aside, we got him calmed down into school. But the one that really, really broke my heart was Zoe, my daughter. She woke up and she was just like, oh, who won? Because she was certain, as everybody else was, that Hillary had won. And I said, well, honey, Donald Trump did. And her eyes just filled with tears. Her face fell. And the things that she said that really, really struck me. First of all, she said, people are going to believe that it's okay to treat women the way he does, that it's okay to talk about people the way he does. But she said, does that mean that we're never going to have a woman president? That meant a lot to her. And I said, no, honey, we will celebrate together when that happens. because it will. I believe it. Although that is not the first order priority in choosing a president, it certainly is an important signifier of our advancement into positive pluralism. But the other things that she really said that really distressed her, because she is a compassionate person well beyond my ability. She said, "What about my friends from Mexico? And what about my Muslim friends?" Because we have a lot of Muslim students at her school. She said, "Are they going to have to go away? They're scared. Their families are scared." And I said, "Well, honey, he may try, but we're going to do everything that we can, at least right here, to keep that from happening. And you are safe. You have to know that we will do everything in our power to make sure you are okay." That's all I could say, though, man. Gives me a pit in my stomach.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Elgin this morning. Like, I had nothing to say when he left, because he's getting out of the car, and and he's just like, how can you be okay? How can you say it's okay if half the country wants a bully to be their president who doesn't listen to scientists and wants to deport his friend's dad?
Yeah.
And I really, all I thought was, I must have done a better job parenting, or I haven't messed up that was his response.
Yeah.
Because I know what mine was. Like, it was anger towards anyone who is being supportive of Trump. That's like my immediate response.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm thinking of what it feels like, and these emotions are coming up, and I'm like, anger, right? That's normal. Tripp it just, I have to temper myself. Elgin's was compassion. And he thought of his friends who clearly had talked to him about it and had shared how they're feeling. And it's I was just like, yeah, you're right. They didn't follow the golden rule, and you can be a good friend. You don't have to have anything to say to be a good friend.
Yeah.
But
they get things that we just don't get, man. They really do.
And I don't, and so as the other thing last night, when stuff's coming in, and I don't know, so I have family in North Carolina, a lot of family in North Carolina. Both Alicia and my family are mostly in North Carolina. He was born there. Elgin was. I voted in 2008, right when we're moving in North Carolina for Obama. We literally voted and moved within 3 weeks of each other or whatever, because we were out here on election night. We hadn't even moved into a place to change our address or anything. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I want to vote North Carolina. Mm-hmm. Well, seeing him being very aware this time of what the decision, the election is, and when North Carolina, the results are coming in, it goes to the map. Now, he knows which counties he's lived in and where his family lives. Mm-hmm. And he knew which families which family members were in a red county. Mm-hmm. And which ones were in blue ones.
He's the next John King then, man.
No, I'm in, and so as much as all the anger's there, then he asked me about our family members who were in red counties who definitely voted red.
Yeah.
And he doesn't say, how could they do it? He says, how can they be Christian?
Yeah.
And I just am at that point, I'm nervous, wreck, pacing back and forth like it's a Lakers finals game. And then he asked that, how can they be Christian? And
it just hits you between the eyes.
Yeah, and you know exactly what he means. Mm-hmm. Because in his head, he's like, family members I know that lived in that county, how can they really be Christian, was the question. And it wasn't about sophisticated policy or any of the things that Republicans and Democrats can normally argue about. It wasn't about that at all. It was just about the character of the candidate for the Republicans. Mm-hmm. And it may, and I have nothing to say, because I don't want his very good memory to remember what
Some
dad
kind of
said out
BS
loud
line.
to then be like,
Right.
hey, uncle, you know
Buddy.
what my dad said about you?
Yeah, right.
I asked how you could be Christian. And I just said, well, Elgin, your people are only Christian because God loves them and is redeeming them regardless of what they say, do, or think. And that's called the gospel. So no one's a Christian because of anything other than what God did. And he's like, well, I guess. But still, if you think God is that nice, why would you ever vote for
A bully
for a bully?
and a sexist.
Yeah. And so like I as a parent who I don't know, like it's just hard to know what the appropriate what appropriate responses are there, because I don't want him, I don't want to feel like I'm coercing him to ever agree or like think what I think. But I also think it's really important that we don't think kids come up with their beliefs and values in a vacuum, that we model and offer them generously to our kids and help them learn what it's like to be a virtuous person and with integrity. And I just was like, Elgin, if you ask that question, your heart's in the right place. That's all I could, like, the only thing I can think. And if your kid asks that question, then you aren't the worst parent in the world. And
if you can't answer it, you're not the worst parent in the world either.
No,
like
he's asking that, and at the same time, I'm like, I really have no interest in talking to those family members.
Yeah,
like and I know they're going to make some stupid, smug response. They're going to attach God to it. They're going to put Jesus' name in it and some dumb junk about America that they somehow think's a light on a hill. And they're still under the weird impression that Donald Trump's going to actually nominate people, he said, and is really pro-life. Like the number of things that are going to come out of their mouths are stuff I just will not even tolerate. I wouldn't know what to do with. And I'll be like, and this is why you're like, everything about it, I'm like, Elgin, I don't know. Because in just like, I don't know. It's, I remember my feelings when Carrie lost. And I was depressed, like sad, oh, really? But I don't remember after that thinking that the character of the nation and a large number of the people is ultimately flawed.
Right.
And that Jesus is going to have to do something to their heart, because the only thing I got for him is a slap around. And I don't want to do that. So I feel like this pressure, like, how's it going to change if I can't engage them without being like blisteringly angry? But also, like, I don't know. Then the family part makes it way, way worse. And I don't know. Everything I'm thinking right now, I don't want to have to edit this. I don't want to regret saying it. And again, this is like straight up just fresh feeling podcast.
Yeah.
So I have a daughter, Cora, who's about to turn 3 in a week. And I have a niece who's younger, Caroline, who is in North Carolina, but the daughter of Alicia's sister. And we got them both of us got our daughters the like presidential Barbie set. Like, it's a Barbie set, like with,
that's a real thing.
Yeah, no, where the president and vice president are females. Yeah, we never got Barbies, but I was like, when Elgin was, a few months old when Obama won, he took his first steps while everyone in the room is clapping at our house. We just moved to California. And I was like, this is awesome. Elgin's first president is awesome. And he is. He has way more class and dignity than everyone else that's a politician except his wife. And
who has the dignity and class not to ever run for politics.
Which is sad, because you have to admit that Obama would have slaughtered Trump, but Michelle would have been completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because do all the girls graduate in 4 years? Because
He says you can bank on it. She is not running for office. Now, I haven't heard her
Yeah,
say.
well, you know what else? You know what else he said you can bank on? That America's smart enough not to elect Donald Trump.
Well,
So
yeah.
maybe Obama's prognostications, in the Bush used to say it,
Careful how you say that.
that he can't pronunciate and prognosticate exactly what she's going to do.
Yeah.
But why I say that is like, I was anticipating like looking at Cora and my niece, and we were like, oh, it's gonna be so awesome to have this memory, like their first election after they're born, and the first woman president, and that they have possibilities for their life that weren't present generations before in the United States. You have this symbolic moment, and then we're stuck like consciously recognizing how big the patriarchy is, and we've made a lot less progress than I think we thought we did.
See, I don't know about that. One thing I want to at least put out there is at least an open-ended question is.
Well, and you brought it up earlier. The reason was because of this saying something out loud and going the other way for college-educated white women. And
right.
Women who saw a man say, and then like 14 different women say he did it, sexual abuse, are publicly saying they're not going to vote for him and then did.
Right.
And I don't know how you do that. Like, what is that move if it's not very much connected to like a cultural layer of patriarchy? That's the part that made, like, of the results, it made me think, oh my God, it's not just they voted against her, it's
they
like,
voted
who
for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much, if any of that, is the sort of thing that Malcolm X talked about, which is this internalized cultural violence of a group that's been marginalized, and how much of that comes back in on itself. I've talked to a lot of my LGBTQ friends, and they say that there's a lot of that within the LGBT community. So I have to wonder that. But at the risk of waxing Paulinian, is it possible that any of this is a birthing pain of progress, and that birth pains are violent, that birth and that change is inherently disruptive and violent? I don't mean bloodletting, although obviously this has been, and I'm not excusing it. I'm just.
No, I think that's definitely part of it, and I think we all can see that we're going there. I just think it sucks to look at your daughter and think, like that the world's very different for you than it is for me.
But that one of the important things you said there, and for me too, it wasn't that they went to Donald Trump or to Hillary Clinton to ask those questions. They're looking at you. They're looking at me. And so we have to be so hyper aware that the things that we tell them, and not just the things that we tell them, but the things we don't say and the things that we're living out, are embedding themselves in them for God knows how many generations, because that stuff just lives on in their DNA memory. And so I think we have to be very mindful of that, even when I am disgusted by certain behavior. For example, my son saying Donald Trump is a horrible person. I said, look, you cannot say that kind of a thing to kids at school, especially, and not expect to keep from getting the shit beat out of you. But we don't talk that way. But the problem is, I want to talk that way.
Oh yeah.
No,
I think that it might be helpful here just to name a few things as parents that are thinking about this you can do, and that we don't often think of, and as Christian leaders. One is whether it's family discussions, Bible studies, small groups, church meetings, as straight men, we need to make sure that we actively listen and give space for females to talk, and that you take what they say as seriously as you take anyone else's. It is okay to admit that you were conditioned and born into a world where that wasn't the case, and it's okay if you're uncomfortable figuring out how to do that.
That's right.
If you are a dad and you have a daughter and a son, and it doesn't matter which or both, and you do not take your wife talking to you's voice seriously in front of them, if you mock her, get disgust, roll your eyes, and all of that, then that is a way we perpetuate patriarchy. Mm-hmm. The dignity that you give your daughter's voice contributing to your family as much as your son's is an important part. Mm-hmm. Figuring out how to ask people who are not used to being heard to contribute in ways that don't minimize their fear for speaking, but also dignifies their response, and listening and asking follow-up questions so that you can hear it. Like, there are lots of little things that we do in our homes, in our churches, in our offices, as a professor in a classroom, and things where we're not intentionally, being sexist or patriarchal or whatever, but we have habits we've inherited from a long time, and it's better to admit them and then to practice patterns that break it and model something different for our children. And no matter who's in the White House or whatever, you can do that. That's in your home.
That's
and
right.
if your daughter sees the voice of their mother being treated as an equal, being listened to, changing the mind of you as husband and father out loud, like you say, "Thank you for saying that. I think you're actually right." Like, saying those things out loud. And when you cut her off or ignore her, talk down, you need to say out loud, "That was wrong. I'm sorry. Will you forgive me?" Mm-hmm. And not do what's so easy in our friendships to be like, "Yeah, my bad," and move on. Because the part of things changing is taking responsibility for the things you can actually do.
That's right.
The things you can actually do, you can participate in democracy. You can participate in these places, but you are actually shaping the expectations of your sons and daughters in the home. And when they have expectations of having an equal voice and listened to, they'll have more confidence at demanding the system give them exactly what it already said from the freaking Constitution itself. Mm-hmm. So, don't feel disempowered as a parent, even though this is a very sad experience for progressive Christian parents. That there are little things we can do. Anyway, sorry, that's the thing I have to always try to remind myself, be it as a minister, as a husband, father, that kind of thing.
And it doesn't even matter necessarily if you're a parent. You can be an aunt, an uncle, a friend of the family, a Sunday school teacher, a just community member in some larger community, whether it's at church or what have you. You come in contact with children who look to you as examples for what it means to be a responsible adult. And we have that responsibility. And it makes me think of, again, Eric Elnes told me a story, but it's also like a Jewish story that I actually I actually heard on Amazon Prime on the show Transparent, the one with Jeffrey Tambor, where they were talking about that there is this belief that there are, and I can't remember exactly how many people it is. I think it's 91 that are sort of carrying the likeness or the semblance of God into the world. They're sort of those stewards of that divinity in the world among us today, right now, and at any time in life. And that we should be behaving as if the person next to us is one of those 91. And, Eric told a similar story. He talked about this auto shop where he took his car, and everybody was just amazed at how much dignity they treated you and how fairly they did, and how they wouldn't do repairs even if you thought they needed to be done if they didn't. And he asked them, how is it that you treat your people, even in ways that don't benefit your business, that you treat people so differently? And he said, we treat every client that comes in the door as if they were Muhammad themselves driving away in a car that we took care of. And to take that sort of mindful, reverential responsibility in our daily interactions, I mean, in some ways it's exhausting, but the more we do it, I think the more natural and inherent it is. And so today I'm starting with the prayer of St. Francis. Tomorrow maybe I'll do something a little different. But yeah, I think I start by slowing down, not mansplaining, saying, what do you think? Getting out of the way sometimes, admitting my faults, my flaws, apologizing, asking for forgiveness, and so on.
The other thing and our families are odd in the sense that both of the moms in the house are ordained Christian ministers.
Yep.
And both the dads talk a lot about God.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a minister as well, but so when you're thinking of issues around women and leadership and stuff, the church has not been the frontier in this, and so if we're like transitioning that last bit as a Christian today, like I think the one of the things that I thought of is at Claremont, when I've taught there, when I was in seminary and divinity schools, I go speak at lots of them. The number of amazing female people that are being educated and ordained who will not get senior minister pulpit jobs because of enlightened progressive men who won't vote for them to come to their congregation,
Mm-hmm.
or bishops who won't send them there because they know what the congregation's thinking, is significant. And I'm not saying everyone that goes to divinity school wants to be in a pulpit or any of that. I'm just saying I know very gifted preachers, ministers, pastoral care people who would serve in those positions if congregations trusted them. And so we as Christians need to recognize that which church you go to, which church you tithe to, which church your children go to, and the roles females play in those places, and the diversity that exists in that congregation for lots of reasons matters. It speaks. That's one of the ways you communicate your commitment as a family. So, like, I just know that it's important for me and Alicia when we've talked, especially now that we're not working at a church, teaching. This is the first time neither one of us have ever worked at a church at any one time. It's always been one of us, sometimes two of us. Prior to Elgin being born, we worked at separate churches too. So, and just even thinking about who are occupying those positions of authority. The reason we have all these emotions as parents, as citizens, is something about who seats in the seat of authority and what it says about the communities when you decide it. And I think the same is true as Christians for our congregations. So like Alicia and I, even though we want to be inclusive and engage lots of different Christians and stuff, we didn't want our kids to grow up in a church where you discussed whether or not women could serve in leadership, gay members could, whether you cared about the environment and worked for justice. Like, we were just not debating those. We want that congregation to be a place where we go, yeah, this is what Christians do, now let's do it. And so like choosing to go to a church that where a gay man preaches almost every Sunday, like, it wasn't like, oh, because Pastor Dave is a gay guy, we're going to go there. But that is part of your decision making. And who is in charge on the council? Like, when we're going through membership class, and I ask, hey, how's our elder group work? How's that look? And knowing that it's as diverse as the congregation, and you're not in there because of who gives money and all that kind of stuff. We need to think about those things as a Christian, as much as the emotion we're having right now around our government. Yeah, but what are you going to do on Sunday? Are you going to go to a church where there's going to be stoles and they're mostly going to be men, and they're mostly going to be straight, and they'll mostly be white? Like, we have to ask those type of questions.
Yeah, I think that's true. And, you pointed out that there are so many capable or even more capable women who do not, or queer, gay, lesbian people who do not get assigned to pulpits who want that. I have a friend in Texas who held out in a region that would not ordain him for 11 years, continuing to serve in a church, because he was even told by the ordination committee there, if you'll just not bring it up, just don't bring up your sexual orientation, your identity. And he's saying that's, it's easy for you to say that because you don't sit around thinking about your sexual orientation on a daily basis. But it's pointed out to me all the time. The more inert way I put this to people is you don't sit around as a right-handed person thinking about being right-handed as much as I think about being left-handed. And not to draw a correlation between gender and sexual orientation issues and handedness, but it's the one little way as a straight middle-class white Christian man that I can somewhat identify. And it's kind of like what people say, with women. It's like, oh, well, I don't really care about that. I don't really see that. I don't really think about that. Well, you should.
Mm-hmm.
You should think about that because God knows they're made to think about it all the time. And just because someone who happens to be female or because they're female even in some ways and equally qualified gets a pulpit doesn't mean that they're treated with dignity and respect and that they're treated with the same level of authority that their male counterpart would have been treated. I have seen and heard things that people have done toward Amy and the way they have treated her over the years that have absolutely disgusted me and almost brought me to a state of violence and have caused me to nearly walk away from organized religion altogether. But I certainly do not envy her this weekend. I do not envy her having to take the pulpit and speak to her congregation about this on Sunday, but you can be damn sure I'm going to be sitting right up front. And as she finishes, I will be right behind her because that is where I can be on Sunday to make a difference. Now, where that is for you, anybody who's listening or watching this, I can't say. But that is what I've decided, that the first thing, the next best thing, as they say in 12-step, do the next right thing or the next best thing. As far as my engagement with the faith community, that's my next right thing. And then once I do that, I'm hoping I'll be open and apprised of the next thing that I need to do. That's the next right thing.
Yeah. I would have to ask Alicia if I'm allowed to tell stories about her experiences, but I would just say that Amy's not the exception. Yeah. I'd also say, because both of our wives are very beautiful women, that doesn't help either.
No.
That for some reason, because you dress up at church, it can lead men to think they get to say stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And
women, too. Women say it, too. They comment
yeah.
on her appearance all the time. Although one of the amazing things that she has done, which caused a real struggle for her, is over the last 2 years, she has gone gray intentionally and has talked about it even from the pulpit at the risk of being self-referential because she believes it is one of those issues that she needs to challenge, this idea that women are valued by women and men based on their appearance. And the interesting thing is probably half a dozen other women in the church now have followed suit. They feel like she's set an example and given permission to be really more fully who they naturally are. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And so, yeah, it's going to continue to happen. People are going to objectify you and whatever, but you also can confront them in a nonviolent way to have to contend with you changing and you not exemplifying some sort of idyllic, stereotypical, feminine sexual figure that they are inclined then to correlate with respect.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to try to say this really nicely since we're going to talk about how I feel about this as a Christian. And I don't want to have to bleep anything out. I'll say it as nice I can and strongly, and you can walk it back, Christian, because I know you're nice and not as heated as me right now. So here's the thing. White evangelicals, you voted for this dude better than all the other Republicans in the last 6 elections.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't think that the rest of the country is calling BS on everything you're ever going to say out of their mouth, like it is hard to describe. Like I used to think that I have like this weird way of methodologically dealing with theological issues and all that stuff. But at my heart, I think I was still an evangelical because I actually like read my Bible, pray every day, have a personal relationship with Jesus, and like to invite people into participating in God's life mediated by Jesus, but not in some exclusive condemnatory way. Now, I have zero interest in using the word evangelical for me because you know who you show up for? 2 Corinthians, groper, birther, racist, patriarchal misogynist, tax dodging, war service dodging, 3 wives, multiple sexual assault cases, and a guy who then said he wanted to punish women for having abortions, even though you have morally evolved past that position.
Right.
On top of all that, the people he gets to support him are like the crazy worse evangelicals. You don't want you don't want Jerry Falwell Jr. being the one that gets on CNN to speak for you. Or at least I hope you don't. He's
Franklin
crazier
Graham.
than his dad.
Yeah.
Franklin Graham?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
He loves him, but I don't. Like my feelings, like at the sheer volume of evangelicals who voted for this dude and the weird reasons they gave it. You can't tell me I voted for a bigot knowingly but don't want to be called one. That's just not how it works. It gets really, really hard for me to go, oh, yeah, I could see that. I could see that. No, you have like other real options. Like you had real options as a people. And guess who it was that gave him the nomination? It wasn't like country club Republicans in the Northeast who occasionally went to mass. Mm-hmm. It wasn't anyone that has dark skin tone. It was white evangelicals.
Right.
White evangelicals. That's who did it. And like, I don't know. I'm going to guess that if you did this, the chance that at your birthday party is anyone of color is small. I'm going to guess that when I've talked to 3 or 4 of my white evangelical friends who are making a case for Trump, I said, please do not make it about Christianity because I'm going to guess your very Christian, Hispanic, and black friends do not feel this way. And they don't. The variable for white evangelicals voting for Trump is not their evangelicalism, it's their whiteness. That's what it is.
Right.
And the fact that you feel your evangelical heritage is threatened by anybody, God raised Jesus from the freaking dead. If you think that your identity as a Christian is under threat because who's in charge of a government, then you're not even a real Christian. Like, it is beyond irritating. And here's the thing. They're probably going to quote some Bible verses and say God wanted Trump to win. That is the stupidest theological idea.
Calvinism.
Yeah. Okay, well, if God's picking out elections, guess who else God has picked out? Really crazy nut job. Oh, well, also President Obama. Like, so, you know, I have some very strong feelings.
Really? You should share those.
There are 5 or 6 lines I've already like self-edited, but the sheer moral bankruptcy of evangelicalism after this experience is so high, like that. I don't know what they do next, other than just admit that that Jesus was a straight white Republican from the South, and they're losing their younger, like, so the exit polls for evangelicals under 40, they lost them.
Right.
And so, like, when you say crap, like, oh, secularism, the rise of blah, 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 like, we're losing our kids' faith. Yeah, you want to know why? You did it.
Because of the inherent racism within Christianity.
Yes.
Yeah.
You did it. it's not your evangelicalism. It's the fact that you're white racist from the South,
Yeah.
and you're using Jesus to cover it up. Like
Right.
and your kids know this. There's a reason they don't go to church or they don't go to yours, and that your retention rate's worse than mainline Protestants. Why? Because they actually know what motivates you.
Yeah.
They know what motivates you.
Yeah.
And anyway, I'm just going to stop because like that is by far the saddest part of this whole thing. Like, that people want to preserve their privilege, that people felt like fear, scared, and want to vote for a dummy. Like there's tons of things where like, okay, that's where we are. But the biggest ally, the thrice married 14 charges of sexual assault, tic-tac pea grabbing, bigot in chief, God, was white evangelicals.
Which he is not an evangelical and has conveniently, and I would argue solely strategically, molded his agenda to pander to the white evangelical vote under the guise of those positions, when really the deeper foundational issue that he has been campaigning on is white privilege, the maintenance of white privilege, make America white again, basically. And I think that evangelical Christianity sold its soul when it married the Republican Party, a la the moral majority. And that was the beginning of the end. Now, you give up an awful lot when you make that pact. And now the reality is that both of them are cringing, I think. I think there are lots of evangelicals. I understand, yes, that there are a lot of racist, sexist, fear-mongering, intolerant evangelical Christians. The reality is we've also got plenty of racist, sexist, fear-mongering people in America who identify as progressive, etc. But systemically, that was imbued into that relationship between the religious right and the social right as a marriage of convenience to win, and now it is still reaping what it sowed.
I agree. What I was saying I was not trying to say like on a moral high horse. Like, I just know that the attempts to explain the other variables away other than race is going to be hard.
If you voted for him simply because of his position today on abortion, you got played.
Oh, yeah.
You got played.
But see, I think that what's the name of the book? Stranded in Babylon, I think is the name of it, or has Babylon in the name. It's a story of the Southern Baptist takeover. And the Southern Baptist Convention, and maybe people don't know this, evangelicals and Protestants in general used to not be pro-life. They became pro-life when they started hanging out with Catholics in order to develop this moral majority type of movement. It used to not really be an issue that was, fighting over. And in the book, I think it's Stranded in Babylon, but whatever. It tells a story of the takeover of the Southern Baptist Convention. This guy who's doing the interviews is a Northern evangelical, so he's like, semi-friendly with the SBC, but not like Southern Baptist conservative. And he's doing an interview with the kind of architects of the takeover. And one of the lines they said, and I think it's important, we could have picked any issue to have the fight over. We picked inerrancy because people like the Bible, and we picked abortion because we knew we could make it repulsive.
It's emotional. That's right.
And
fear and anger. We're back to fear and anger.
And so those issues have been cultivated for a long time as like markers of like being an evangelical or whatever, like the abortion issue or whatever. That was intentional, but it was done by them. And then politicians figured out how to do it. But it was done by them to take over denominations and really to split people. And it was around power and all sorts of stuff.
That's right.
But but the idea that we could have picked anything, and we picked these for this reason, was I think striking, because I talked to one of my friends who's a Southern Baptist minister, who said to me, before the Comey thing, he's like, I can't vote for Trump. I can't vote for Hillary because I'm pro-life. And I said, well, I mean, does the fact that if you were to take the last 20 years, the lowest abortions are when her husband and Obama were in charge, and that they drop each year, Democrats are in charge, and then go up when you are? Like, or is it just some principle absolutist thing that actually has no chance of working in a democracy? Because to me, that quest for purity you're having is saying there are lots of reasons, I just explained to you, I would vote Democrat because I care for the poor. And I see climate change as an issue. And by the way, my party, he's a Republican, I know they're racist because of the voter laws they did the moment the Supreme Court undid the voting rights laws. Like, and they literally said, North Carolina, you made racist laws. And they did. So like, he's sitting there as like a young Baptist preacher, ethically going like, I would vote for it, but there's this one thing. And I said, help me understand how, short of something that's never going to happen, namely,
Roe v. Wade's not going to get over.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Right.
Short of that, wouldn't you want fewer to happen? And wouldn't you organize your entire well-being around this one issue that matters to you, is giving full funding and support to any woman who chooses to carry out the pregnancy? And I really
improve healthcare services so women don't resort to that in the first place in a lot of cases, which I think is one reason that under progressive leadership that there are fewer abortions.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, if you educate people, you give them health resources and all kinds of things, it's amazing what happens.
That's right.
And he's in his response is what was telling is because he said that, well, for me, I guess I am just a purist on that issue, but I get what you're saying. But I know that this is a conversation I could never have with my congregation.
But the ethical purism along these hard and fast, absolute binary lines are ideological fallacies.
Yes.
They're based on
saying he can't talk about it with his congregation. I think, to me,
yes, you can, but you risk too much. Yeah. He's saying he's not willing to risk what it takes, and that's one of the things I'm starting to call BS. See, I'm editing myself.
Well done, well done.
In my mouth. I'm tired of religious leaders, and I've heard this from authors, from bloggers, from podcasters, from political figures, from religious leaders saying, I can't do that. I can't say that. That is wrong. You can say it. What you're saying is you're not willing to risk what you think it might take you to say it. And I'm not going to stand on some moral high horse here, because I have made compromises in my life as well. But I've also made conscious risk assessments and gone ahead and done something that I know is detrimental to my career or to my public image. I stood up against the way progressives were talking about Mark Driscoll at one point, and man, did I get hammered. I lost a lot of followers over it. I have no love for Mark Driscoll. That's beside the point. But, I also, I think we have to stop throwing our hands in the air. We cannot benefit from a system that empowers us with a platform and a voice, even an income and a standard of living, and then say that I have no power, I have no choice. You always have a choice. And you have to decide how important it is. So what you're saying when you say, I can't say or do that, is it's not important enough to me. I call BS on that. And I've told Amy before, I said, if there's something that's going to get you in trouble, but you feel 100% passionate about it, and you're really doing it from a place informed by prayerful contemplation and the gospel, then you do it. If it causes you to lose your job and we have to change houses or move, at least we go to sleep at night knowing that you made a choice that'll allow you to rest your head at night. And I have to do the same thing. So stop saying that. I'm sorry. There's my little moral outrage. Because nothing will change if we are going to bow down to the table scraps of privilege that we get, and some of us big buffets of privilege. If we're not willing to risk any of that for justice, it won't change. Get off the high horse.
No, Christians, like thinking about Christians, like so, I do lots of interviews.
Yes.
In the past few months, I've interviewed a number of evangelical theologians who teach at very prestigious evangelical places. And I've been trying to intentionally, especially if they ever say yes, have more evangelicals on the podcast. And what's amazing is the conversation I regularly have with evangelical leaders when the microphone ends. When it's off, they're very clear about how they feel and how they feel out of their faith around a lot of the issues that were in this election.
Yeah.
And be it their endowed chair, be it the expectations of their publishers, seminaries, divinity schools,
pension funds,
all sorts of stuff. And I mean, I'm not talking about like secretly they're Arian on their Christology or don't like the Trinity. I'm talking about ones who the moral clarity they have around this election was made evident in ways that they could not say while we're conducting an interview. And that compared with the leaders like Franklin Graham and people who do feel very comfortable saying stuff that is just embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're cultivating a community of Christians where those called vocationally to care for the narrative, story, and tradition of people inspired by the life of Jesus, the cross-dead, first-century persecuted Jewish dude, then you can't trust those people to call you out on privilege as being citizens and dominant people in an empire today when we worship someone who was killed by an empire, who went around talking about an alternative one, namely one run by God and not Caesar of the day. Like if your culture is such that the actual people who daily wrestle with the text, the tradition, in prayer and educate your ministers do not feel comfortable telling you that they can't in good conscience consider voting for someone, then I think that is a sign of a problem. Yes, it frustrates me when someone feels like they can't share or whatever. Like I'm like, maybe if your hands were as big as Donald Trump's, you'd say something. But I also think like it's a sign that the culture you've cultivated and called Christian is actually not necessarily Christian. The religion you're worshiping in your churches is one that is probably okay to say you doubt different doctrines and quote Bible verses. You can open theists will argue with Calvinists. If you're edgy, you can like doubt eternal damnation. You're like, I'm an annihilationist, and then they'll have nice books about that. But
right.
To doubt our current political system, and be it exploitative economic system, be it the way white supremacy functions in our culture and in our churches, be it the way we justify the moral depravity of someone who celebrates violating women, and
because of self-preservation, and that's like where
Like we just have to admit that the true religion we're expecting orthodoxy on isn't about the Bible at all. It's about preserving Christian hegemony in the current empire. That's
right.
the true religion. And you can sing your worship songs, come up with stupid Bible charts to justify Zionist attacks on Palestine, deny climate change, deny racial oppression, all this other stuff. The one true religion of large numbers of American evangelicalism that their trained theologians are not even allowed to step on isn't doctrine. It is dogma connected to political power and privilege.
And capitalism. I think you cannot leave that out. And
I know. I agree with that. That would be what we would say at a normal election.
Right.
We didn't get to talk about economics.
No,
we didn't even get past the fact that a lying, the level of just sheer lying. Hillary is probably not the world's greatest truth teller for Democrats, and yet she looked like Mother Teresa compared to when you go fact checking Donald Trump.
It's still hard to hold much moral high ground when you've been found fact checked in great error yourself. Not to say that given the two, I'm going to come out on the balance of Clinton. But going back to this religious thing, because you said, what do we do as religious community? I don't very often put the cross at the center of my theology or even my Christology.
But I'm praying for you.
Yes, thank you, and I appreciate that. But buckle your seatbelts because I'm gonna.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, in the way that Frank Schaeffer does, actually. So, two things. One, Walter Wink says that if you're silent in the face of injustice, you're complicit. You're as responsible for what happened as the person who propagated that in the first place. Who engaged actively in that act of violence. So sin of omission is still a sin, to put it in more religious verbiage. But the reality is, consider how Christianity would have been different had Jesus sat back and go, I know this is wrong, and I can only go so far here. I get a good thing going.
He would have listened to Peter. He's like,
right.
He sets his eyes towards Jerusalem, and Peter's like, hey, they're going to kill you there, right?
Stay on this mountain, build a tent, chill out, do your ministry. We can actually build some mo here, and we can have a good, religious thing happening here. There's no reason to risk all of that for this. And he says, then you don't get it. You look, but you don't see, and so if we are truly modeling ourselves after the life teachings and commitment, the level of commitment of Jesus to what he believed was right, then when you ask yourself, what is worth risking for this cause, for what I say I believe, there is nothing off limits. Same as the rich man who asked him, what does it require of me? Everything. It requires everything. So, and I'm not claiming any moral authority here. I follow Jesus 60% of the way to the cross all the time. And I don't mean martyrdom per se. I mean taking risk for what's right. But to speak from a position of authority, as we do, as voices trying to compel people to more clearly see and live into the path set out by Jesus, to then follow Jesus 60, 70, 80% of the way to the cross, and to call the work finished, or to shrug our shoulders and say, well, I can't really go any further, you're fooling yourself. And so we can sit around and we can criticize the other, whoever we claim that to be today. And it's really easy today, right? And yes, we need to stand against systems and choices and actions that are inherently violent, personally and more broadly in our culture. But we cannot stop taking responsibility for our complicitness in that until you're willing to go 100%.
And I think the thing for me is not like, in one sense, this election is like the nail in the coffin to ever, like, for me feeling like I could at some point reconcile with being a Baptist from the South and evangelicalism, because like my own piety, expression of the faith, and all, like, I'm much more at home in an evangelical church, like, that is like the piety part, not like turn or burn or any penal substitution. I just mean like that you and your faith are like your faith is a heartfelt one,
right?
And that's where joy comes from. And like I'm like the guy who could end up just playing worship songs by himself to pray. I get most of my listeners are like, oh my God, how in the world could Tripp be that person? But he is.
And I think it's adorable.
And this isn't, and I don't mean this in any like judging way. Like, right. This is I don't think that type of piety has a privilege as a Christian expression more than others. Than my like super contemplative, I don't use words, apophatic-y with very rituals and incense types. So don't hear that. I just know the sad part for me is knowing that in my like 20s angry judgment days about that experience, that guy was actually right. Like my experience and the judgment I've tried to withhold towards my past about like how Southern evangelicalism is they're expressing, it's convincing me that my worst intuitions were actually correct. And that's sad. Because I dreamed of a time that you had like celebratory progressive churches, giving homes for people that would like to have like not boring music, like progressive celebratory exegetical sermons, and that you teach the faith as something you take seriously in your home, in your vocation, and that you're working for God's dream to become more a reality. And yet you don't feel like it's your job. You are working with God because God's promised to do it. And I think like right. There's so much part of like evangelicalism that it saddens me to think like this is what they do at this point, and I feel a personal type of rejection. So I don't want anyone hearing my frustration as something like until today I would have just assumed I'm the edgy one of your bunch, and I don't feel that way right now, and that's sad because I'd always hoped like I would have a homecoming type of a situation at some point.
Yeah, see, I gave up on that a long time ago.
But you had a much more negative experience with the church.
Yeah,
like my family were Southern Baptist church planners, and we got removed for having women around and gay people singing at church and things like that. But if you growing up, my experience of a Baptist church planting family in the South was my dad was one of the first white ministers to work in the racial reconciliation movement in North Carolina, and I thought he did an interracial marriage when we first moved to North Carolina. When I'm in elementary school, they burned a cross, and I'm like, thinking back, I'm like, yeah, like racial reconciliation, something has been a part of my family, and it was connected to our faith. Starting a church for people who would never go to a normal one. Before it was like trendy to start churches and stuff like that, my family did. It was our family's mission to give people that can't find a home in normal churches a home. And yeah, like it turned into a whole thing later and stuff like that. But like I remember people like finding community again and being a part of it. Being a part of the Baptist AIDS Partnership in North Carolina, like because my dad helped it, putting on these retreats for people with HIV/AIDS and their caretakers. By the time I'm in middle school, I'm leading worship twice a year with transvestites, cross-dressers, people coming out of prison who hated the other race and are reconciling. And that was what being a Baptist evangelical church planter's kid meant. You were on the front lines of dealing with these justice issues, creating community and spaces. And like when I went to college and I met some of the others, I'm like, are y'all really Baptist? Are you really evangelical? Because why would you ask Jesus in your heart only to become a bigot? And I'm like, didn't your heart get bigger when he moves in? And so
I don't have room for tolerance anymore. I had to make room for Jesus. Yeah.
Know, but that's the sad, like for me, that's I just don't want anyone feeling like the animosity was at someone I see as other. this is really one of the experiences where I go like, I don't know if I have a space there anymore. And that's really a sad thing, because I do know, and Christian probably can anticipate this one, I regularly feel odd hanging out with mainline Protestants the moment one's personal life and all that kind of stuff comes up. Like, I get creeped out when you have to decide whether or not you pray at meals. Like,
Right.
I go in there, I don't know, it's really awkward. I'm like, how is it awkward? Like, so for me, this has like been a very intense experience.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a door is shut on that part of my life or home or something like that.
There's an opportunity there. All right. At the risk of being whatever all those labels were that you threw around before, because we know that 90% of those apply to me.
Well,
it's all right. And yet
that's why we're friends talking.
That's right. That's right. And we are people of faith that are making an attempt at making a real substantive community and dialogue and modeling what it is that we say we stand for. But Thich Nhat Hanh, a guy who wrote Living Buddha, Living Christ, he said,
which is an amazing book if you've never read it.
It's incredible. But he's written a bunch of other things too, and he's incredible. He's a Buddhist, but he also is a devout studier of Jesus. He said, we look at the fact that flowers can grow in the garbage. Now, we may all feel like we just walked into a big steaming pile of garbage today, right? But we're amazed at when flowers or something beautiful can grow out of garbage. Think of what you got to put in your garden to make things, to give life to it. And sometimes things get really crappy to yield something beautiful. So, at the risk of being sort of pie in the sky or whatever, but I'm a person of hope. I have to be sometimes against hope. But what he said is, you have to understand that flower needs the garbage. It doesn't exist without it. Mm-hmm. And so not to say, oh, well, thank you for dropping this big steaming pile on my doorstep today. I'm not going to thank you for that, but what I am going to do is I'm going to look for a way to make something beautiful out of it. So, that's the hard work that I'm looking at right now. And it's always beautiful to me when I look at somebody who is a non-Christian that helps me understand Jesus better. And that, to me, that's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the other thoughts that come to my mind as a Christian in this type of situation is how many things as leaders in Christian communities need to be addressed before you're at a time of anxiety and decision making. That kind of like like a tragedy happens, and then you hear congregants saying really crazy things to people that are grieving, and you had a whole blog series about stuff Christians shouldn't say, but it's like, it's in a time of tragedy and grief isn't the time to have a conversation about providence and divine power and suffering and stuff. Like, in a heated election probably is not the time for us as the church to start introducing thoughtful Christian reflection on participation in government or not, moral character in government, and the role of politics, state, and all. One of the things that demonstrates, I think, is the need to do education and reflection together as Christians outside of an anxiety-ridden situation. Because I know there are people I don't even want to talk to right now that in a year we probably could have a very good conversation, understand each other better, and make some progress, or at least have lines of communication we could not have right now.
Right.
And I think as ministers and public figures connected to Christianity, or even in your own congregation, that we need to advocate for dealing with the issues and expressions and ideas and things that are coming up now when things are cooled down, not to do what the church tends to do, to like you don't read your Sojourners magazine until we're 6 months out from an election, or you don't like talk about legislation, political issues, and these type of things unless you're forced to by external things. Well, we need to recognize the church to educate and cultivate a space for education and conversation in our congregations about these issues outside of partisan election time, so that we as Christians can model some type of better dialogue. Because like what didn't happen was like, it was like we don't have whatever muscle built up at all to figure out how to be in that intense of a situation and practice the kind of careful, thoughtful, critical engagement where you're dignifying the other, because we don't practice it outside. Like this country is more polarized, the churches are more polarized, and all that stuff. Some of them, to avoid it, just submerge it and never talk about it. Others champion a prescription for political situations in ways that make people feel kind of coerced to be somewhere. But I think we need to, rather than be prescriptive as Christians or to deny these conversations, to learn some type of descriptive, reflective analysis around political thinking, participation, ethics, so that no matter what happens in 2 years when the next election comes, we've thought about it and are able to demonstrate, maybe we could look like Christians as we are engaging the political season and not look like partisans. And I think that's possible. I just know it's hard. And if you're a minister and you go scroll through your congregation's Facebook feeds, look and say, have I succeeded as a leader if this is what it looks like? Because I know when I was talking with a friend last night, one of the students here at the Hatchery, and like I know all my temptation for hitting likes were the worst things all my friends said that I agreed with. And like, and I totally know that's true. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's something for us to think about as Christians. And the other thought, and this is kind of the last thing I thought of, was, or maybe it's not so much of a thought as much of a request. For those of you who aren't like middle age or whatever we are, somewhere in the middle.
I'm middle-aged, dude. I'm accepting that.
Straight married white men who are thinking about this as a citizen and as a parent and husband and as a Christian. Like one of the requests I think is, if we're going to do this well, then we need to figure out how to listen and also give space and platform for as many voices as feel called to speak into this. So, I say all that because, like, I just want to make sure everyone feels like I can be an ally in whatever way that is, be it helping you figure out how to start a podcast, or last week I had a friend who's a minister at a prophetic black church in LA called and said, "Can I ask you something?" And I was like, "What?" And he's like, I need you to tell me what goes through a white man's head when I say this." And I was like, "I think I can do that." And it turned into like one of those conversations. You're like, "Oh my God, I have a real friend. This was amazing." But
I love conversations like
that. It took that like really awkward ask, and I'm like, "Well, I can do that. Where's this going?" But I think we need to figure out how to listen more, listen deeply, listen broader. And when people have ideas about it and stuff, definitely let me know in ways.
Likewise.
Yeah, no, I know. I just,
with regard to publishing, podcasting, building your platform, anything like that I can help with. I mean, I just in that I can learn from you as well. That's the other thing, is we're not like these reservoirs of expertise, that don't can be added to as well. Any conversation we have with someone else, just like you were saying, is edifying for us as well. So it's an opportunity. And if you have something that you want to come on our show and talk about on the Homebrew Culture Cast that is relevant to faith and culture and these sorts of things we're talking about, I welcome you, because I may not know what I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's my own myopia. And I can only read and research so much. And I'm not perfect in that respect. I have a white male privileged lens, and I need help being shaken out of that sometimes. So come to me and talk to me about it.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I think that I would just say is that and I know we said it up front, but this was a conversation like of two friends dealing with this experience, processing it together emotionally right after the fact. And I'm sure if for some reason I re-listen to this later or rewatch it in a couple of years, like there'll be immediately obvious things I didn't say or should have said, assumptions or things I made that were completely wrong. And I just expect that to happen. And if the Holy Spirit really leads you to harass me about it, you're more than welcome. I just want to like add a footnote to everything and just say like, this was an attempt just for us to share feelings. This was not like Tripp being reflective as a theologian, trying to be calm and rational or whatever. This was like Tripp, the dad and citizen who's angry and does not know how to muster being Christian right now, but I'm going to attempt to do it by talking to someone named Christian.
Fair enough.
No, you know what I mean? Like, I just think it's important to say that. And because I don't know what in the, like, I think we'll have more constructive responses later. Idea. So at the bottom of the video, if you're watching the video, I'll put a link to the SpeakPipe. And if you click it, then you can leave a message up to 3 minutes. It could be a comment, a question, an idea, or anything. Connect to anything we said, be it experience you had with your family or kids after this, an idea you had for dealing with it, something positive, negative, that thinking of dealing with your Christian family or friends, like whatever.
Questions.
Yeah. Questions, comments, concerns, ideas. Put them there. And that way we can try to do a show after having thought. I think it would be really cool to also get some of the other people from Homebrewed in on the show, and hear also about how the sermon and everything goes on Sunday with Amy, and process it more. But I think it would be really cool to do it if we have enough voices from people that listen to either of our podcasts to do a detox show.
I think that'd be great, and I'd be happy to include them on the Homebrew Culture Cast too. I think that's one of the efforts we have in cross-pollinating is to avail ourselves to other perspectives.
Yeah,
and I think that's important as well. So we welcome that. It doesn't mean we'll always hear it in the healthiest way, because we're also in an emotional place, but we want to try. And so if you have enough trust in us to try, then we'll try to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to leave it as an audio message, you don't have to. You can always just email us or something. Right. But I think it's really cool to hear people's actual voices.
I do too.
And because, like, literally, I just knew I wasn't going to get anything done until I talked with someone. Mm-hmm. And I texted Christian, and he's like, "Okay, I'll get on." And then this happened.
Yep.
So I think it'd be awesome to really open it up. And in the meantime, I know that I hope God opens up a little more compassion in my heart for all sorts of people and issues right now. And I'm optimistic, not in myself, but in God. So
yeah. Yep.
Any
gotta be, man. Yeah, we gotta be people of Christian. No, just slow down. Slow down, open up, listen, look, but also try to see, listen, but also try to hear, make room, and have hope. Hope is not based on outcomes. Hope is not based on results. Neither is faith. Hope is for the sake of itself. Love is for the sake of itself. Faith is for the sake of itself. Let those be enough sometimes to keep you going. And I know it sounds like pretty words, but I'd like to think I believe those things.
Well, you said you can sometimes muster 60%. So I maybe that's what you got.
That's right.
Yeah. So thank you if someone actually managed to sit around this whole time. And if this is your first time listening to the Culture Cast that normally listens to Homebrewed, you should subscribe. And if you normally listen to Culture Cast and you're like, I can't even listen to an hour-long interview with a theologian, maybe you can. Or just do it as penance. Say, like, I'm normally cool. I know what movies, I know culture stuff, but like, I should really remind myself that all the world is not as awesome as me. Let me try to tolerate what Tripp's about to ask these people. So you could do that.
That's right. No, and you're one of the most engaging minds and hearts in the progressive Christian conversation that I know out there. And it's a resource out there for free. So why you wouldn't, I don't know.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. And if you want to hang out with us the last weekend of President Obama's administration, you can come to for Theology Beer Camp. And I am real excited because the first two theologians we announced, actually three, the first three that announced, I'm trying to remember how many are on the website yet, but you can go to theologybeercamp.com. One is Adam Clark. He is a young black theologian, he's a chair of the Black Theology Group at the American Academy of Religion. He's writing the Homebrewed Christianity Guide to Salvation. He's going to be there, and now we'll have a whole nother, I'm guessing some of the questions and topics are going to be coming up as we enter the Trump administration, and it'd be helpful for us to be able to talk about with Adam. He's been on the podcast before, and it's been really helpful for me. Clement Haskins going to be there. She's a womanist theologian, a friend of mine from did her PhD at Claremont, and she's a pastor at a multi-ethnic church in LA, and a theologian, and tons of fun. And then Eric Hall's coming, who is a Catholic theological ethicist, a real good friend of mine, who converted to Catholicism on purpose. I was just a little jab at you, Eric. And he teaches a lot of theological ethics and stuff. So I'm really glad he's going to be there. And then there's other people, I'm sure all of you can guess, who show up at Homebrew related things. But
Amy's going to be there. That's a reason right there to go. I mean, Tripp and I'll be there, but Amy will be there. So
yeah, and there's gonna be a whole host of other podcasts and all sorts of stuff. But I just meant they're gonna be there, and so as we get closer to the event and are thinking about what we need to think about as Christians theologically during the serious parts of it, they'll be there to be a resource. And I'm looking forward to learning, hanging out, and then there's lots of fun stuff too. So I'm really looking forward to that part.
I am too.
And I'm looking forward to dominating Christian in cornhole.
That won't be difficult.
Tournament.
Yeah,
and I like dominating the hole and tossing.
You can dominate my cornhole anytime.
Tossing sacks right in. Balls that's how you score points. It's a game. It's like a beanbag toss, but the sack is full of corn.
Yep. You got to throw it in the hole.
And we'll be distributing Tic Tacs before we play cornhole.
Oh god!
All right,
Lord. All right, now we're at 40% to the cross. We just took 20% of a step back.
Well, yeah, it is what it is. All right, leave us a message on the SpeakPipe, and we'll talk to you again soon. I'm going to go pray for my salvation, and hope the Paraclete can move this afternoon, or at least get distracted by reading some book.
There you go. Fair enough.
All right. Well, tell your family hi, Christian.
All right. You too. Hang in there.
All righty. Peace.
Bye.